Hi, this is Ed Lawrence, Director of Research with Colliers here in Pittsburgh. I'm sitting down today with Audrey Russo, who is the CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. Audrey, we really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much. This will be included in Colliers Pittsburgh's quarterly report, retail, industrial, office, and multifamily for the second quarter of 2025. Thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it. Did you want to say a few words about your role at the Tech Council, the organization, and some of your background?
Sure. I mean, it's an amazing organization. It's called the Pittsburgh Technology Council. We're entering our 43rd year, which is pretty crazy.
Congratulations.
And I've been here 17 years, which is hard to believe. But came to Pittsburgh through Alcoa, through an acquisition of Alcoa. Worked in tech and then worked for Carnegie Mellon professors that started a company and then came to the Tech Council. So I've been here a little over 2 decades, and I've had a chance to see a lot of the transformation of the region, and obviously most recently in this role, have an upfront view of what's happening across the ecosystem in terms of tech and innovation.
Lots of fun, and I'm sure lots of changes along the way.
A lot of fun.
And that kind of leads into the first question or discussion point. You know, Pittsburgh has really, with your assistance and others, built a very strong reputation in the tech community as a true tech hub. Just wondering from your perspective, the ways that the city can keep, in the region, can keep that momentum going, and maybe some of the challenges and obstacles that might be out there that would need to be overcome to not only maintain that momentum, but take it to the next level, if you will.
I mean, you know, that's a big question and that's a broad swath, but I think it's important to know that in this region, in many ways, against all odds, we really become an epicenter for a lot of innovation and technology, particularly because of the investment in research and development in our universities. Obviously, we have major universities like Carnegie Mellon and University of Pitt, but there are others who are doing deep work across so many different sectors of innovation that together, that really holds the region. It holds the region because we're bringing people in from all over the world to get educated here. And when they get educated here, you know, they leave a little bit of their footprint. And, you know, we, of course, like many other cities, want these people to stay. And that's always a tricky part. You know, I don't know about you, but, you know, when I went to college, it wasn't necessarily that I was going to stay there afterwards, right? There's lots of, you know, opportunities that present themselves, particularly for people in fields where there's high demand, that the competition is fast and furious around the world. So, you know, making Pittsburgh a place that's a destination is really important, because then people start to see that there's opportunities here that they hadn't thought of before. But the opportunities that are even greater are the ability to start companies. And that's the piece that, you know, we work pretty hard on, you know, making sure that, you know, Carnegie Mellon University has their, you know, incubator and their innovation center, same thing with the University of Pitt. They do whatever they can to make sure that there's support for those ideas that people have, and then hopefully through that piece of their journey, a student or a graduate will see that this is a place to build something, and I don't have to go somewhere else. And that's always the tricky part. Where's the money? Where's the leadership? Where's the talent to, you know, build those companies? And not everyone's built to be an entrepreneur either. So, you know, it makes for, you know, fascination, because we're competing with the globe. We are competing with Singapore. We are competing not just with Silicon Valley. We're competing with the world. And so as a result, there are things that we need in a region like this, or in a state, that are very pro-business and pro this generation of people who have expectations.
No, I totally agree. And as a native Pittsburgher, I beam with pride when I hear about all the great things being achieved here. But you're right, we need to be a city of choice. And when you bring up Singapore, it strikes me as, I hadn't thought of that, but you're exactly right nowadays with the way that business is conducted. It can be anywhere on the globe that we compete against.
So it's important to have that sense of place, that transportation, right? Ground, air, you know, what are the expectations of people who are global citizens? Do they expect that they need to be in a car all the time? Do they, you know, is it easy for them to have a nightlife? Is it easy for them to, we have the amenities of cultural, institutions that definitely are top tier. The question is, do we have enough diversity across all of that that appeals to a generation of people who want that and expect that at their fingertips?
Yeah, totally agree. And that legacy of being an industrial city in the late 1800s and into the 1900s, you know, the benefit is that we have a rich cultural.
Really, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's larger than, it's disproportionate to the size of our city.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, which is wonderful. Just to shift gears a little bit, Audrey, exciting announcement, I think a couple of weeks ago, about the Dreams Coalition that launched. That's I believe a collaboration, a Keystone Space Collaborative. It's a bold step forward. I know that Brian Kennedy with the Tech Council and your organization in general has been very interested and active in the aerospace and defense ecosystem. Can you tell us a little bit about this collaboration and Dreams?
Yeah, I mean, this collaboration with the Keystone Space, Collaborative, I'm saying that twice, but this coalition is the Keystone Space, Collaborative. They are looking at a tri-state area. They believe that the strength of the ecosystem lies outside of just the epicenter of Pittsburgh. So when you've taken Ohio, you've taken West Virginia, and you consider what the assets are in Pittsburgh, their belief is that we have a role in aerospace. And that role in aerospace is across so many different sectors.
Right.
People don't think about where they might fit into the opportunities.
Sure.
So the natural alliance for us is that we've been spending the last 3.5, 4 years focusing on enhancing our relationships with the Department of Defense, any of the federal agencies, and making sure that they know what kind of assets are sitting here in Pittsburgh, but even more importantly, people who are building companies understand that there are pathways to customers that are not the typical pathways that they think about. So that when they get out of, they get their idea, they understand that there's opportunities for what's referred to as dual use. And dual use means there's an application in the military, you get a chance to have a contract or relationship inside the military to test your ideas. But then at the same time, that leverages you to apply that technology in the everyday world. And the everyday world could be, anything that you could imagine in terms of everyday world.
Right.
So you look at it from the health side, you could look at it from the material science side. You can look, we can go down to every, isolated cluster. And the beauty of those relationships and opportunities with the Department of Defense, for example, is that you're gaining access to be able to test your ideas with real users, with people who are, able to use that technology, and your opportunities for investment will likely go up because you de-risk the experiment, so to speak. And that is the piece that we've been leading at the Tech Council. We've been leading by having conversations, engaging with leaders across those departments, exposing them to what kind of innovations are here. And at the same time, with this particular collaborative that we're referring to, we will now have technical assistance for companies so that they will begin to understand, how do you get these awards? How do you navigate that? Because it's not that simple. It's not that simple. But once you understand that, and you have the technical assistance and you have the support and you get the access, it becomes more of an open door.
It's so important, I think you're right, because then those companies can focus on their core mission and growing their business and rely on the expertise of a group like the Tech Council for some of those ancillary things that are just part of being in that.
But it's important so that we're focusing on giving them the technical assistance. This is one piece of a bigger strategy that we have.
And not to pick on just one company, but I will. Near Earth autonomy. I saw an article as I do my morning research. The Wall Street Journal just had a big article about the use of drones for military purposes. I know that's something that Near Earth has been very involved with. So just as one example of that here locally, and if we could shift a little bit, because it does tie into it, but the startup companies and these organizations that are growing and maturing, obviously they rely on talent to be able to fuel that. And that brings us to, again, talent development. I know you talked earlier about startups and the ecosystem in general. And I think some folks might be surprised to know the extent that the Tech Council tries to or does develop talent within our region. Can you talk about some of the programs that you have currently?
Sure.
And maybe what impact that has on the region from a
Sure.
talent development standpoint?
Well, we run a lot of programs,
Mhm.
and we make sure that we're not duplicative, so that if there are people out there and organizations out there doing this work, we make sure that we're not replicating it.
Great. Yep.
So we leverage our relationships with industry. And when you think about that, it's really important for educators to be closely tied to industry. And so we do that through many different programs. We do that by having mentors in our Young Girls Launch program. We have annual events that are STEM related, that are educator related, where we bring industry in, we bring quote unquote educational technology solutions together,
Right.
so that people can get exposed while they're in the classroom. So we do that kind of thing, and those are very distinct programs. But we also have a program called Apprenti,
Mhm.
and our Apprenti program is one that creates, we started it back during COVID actually, when we realized how many people we were leaving out. It became so evident how many people we were leaving out. And you may say, why didn't you notice that before? But I think what gave us really the insight was so many people without technology and without having access to what they need. And we saw that during COVID. We saw that in schools, we saw that in communities, we saw that, friends and family, and we heard that. So we worked really hard to figure out what are some alternative pathways to make sure that we're not leaving people out.
That's great.
And so we believe, and our hypothesis has proven to be true, is that people don't necessarily need to be matriculated through some of our stellar universities.
Mhm.
I'm not saying there's not a pathway for people there. There certainly is.
Right.
But many of the opportunities, including software development, business analysts, cybersecurity, just as some examples, we partner with boot camps. There's only a couple, so we're pretty strict about who we partner with.
Okay.
And we partner with boot camps, and through that process, we partnered with a national organization called Apprenti. We call ours Apprenti PGH, and they sort of showed us ways to get people who might have a GED or might, definitely over the age of 18, or people who left the workforce, or people who are in the workforce and don't like what they're doing, or just sort of an array. And we get them through this boot camp, but the difference is we take it after the trades model. And the
Okay.
trades model means you get paid for learning. So they get paid and they get employed right at the beginning. And then they go through, after they finish the program, they reach one milestone, and then their salaries increase, they work in the job, and we've been able to place people in consulting firms, in healthcare,
Wow.
in manufacturing, and cybersecurity. So, our dream is to have at least 100 apprentices a year to go through that program, because we believe then that transforms the workforce.
Yeah.
And we're allowing people who would never have pathways to gain access to that. And we're talking about jobs that start anywhere from 72K on up.
That's
So we're not we don't
Yeah.
use the term livable wage. We talk about transformative.
Mhm. And you really need to have the buy-in from the employers.
It's
Right,
leadership.
and the business
It's about
community,
leadership,
yep,
right?
yep,
Right.
that are willing to go out there a bit and
Right.
to be able to develop that talent. Because personally, I look at it as there's so many different areas for talent development, and to your point, it would be a shame for any one of those not to be fully developed, because that's what it's going to take for Pittsburgh to be successful, right?
I mean,
Is
it's
the
not
board,
just Pittsburgh, but like I'm selfish
Yeah.
because it is Pittsburgh. But
right,
the new world of jobs are very different. And so
Right.
if you can get people into the understanding that it's continuous learning and it's what we call stackable skill sets,
okay,
you're going to need that. I'm
Right.
going to need that.
Yeah.
We're all going to need that. We
right,
can't just think that we get a certificate or we get a diploma or we get,
Yeah.
some sort of, program that you go through, that's the end. No,
Yeah.
that's the beginning.
right. And that truly is, it's a win-win, for the employer and the employee to be
Yeah, people
developed
are-
that way. That's fantastic, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, best of luck with the continuation of that program and
Yeah,
the
so if
momentum.
people are listening,
That's awesome.
we're always open to
Yep.
having new partnerships.
No question about it. So maybe to round out our discussion, then you talked about your tenure here. You've had over 2 decades. That's wonderful. just curious, was there a period in time where you really saw Pittsburgh to begin to transform itself as a region towards being a tech hub and being a leader in that community?
It's funny, when I first moved here, 2001, and I was not working in this job, but people would say, "You're moving to Roboburg." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I looked around, and it wasn't really true in terms of commercialization. It definitely was true inside of Carnegie Mellon.
Right.
Inside Carnegie Mellon was working on autonomous vehicles, trucking, doing magical, amazing things, like it seemed like going to Mars. And now I guess that was like as old as the Tech Council, if not older.
Right.
And that's how long they've been working on autonomy. So there was this sort of like little buzz that we heard about COA, that it was like Roboburg. But I never saw real evidence of anything materially occurring. But it wasn't until Google came here. So when Google set up, and I'll never forget that I was working at Maya Design, and one of our guys got recruited to Google. And we were like, Google's here in Pittsburgh?
Right. Yeah.
They had like 8 people over at Carnegie Mellon in their innovation center. And, we lost our guy to go there. And I was like, what? And offered him a lot more money than what we were paying, and all this autonomy. So I went over myself, and I said, I got to find out what's going on over here. And back then, Andrew Moore was running Google, and, he's one of our region's rock stars, doing amazing things.
Yep.
And I went, hey, what's going on in here? And they had like about 10 people in there. And he and I became friends, fast friends after that. But I thought it was pretty funny. So there's Google, right?
Yep.
So then you fast forward a few more years, and then you had Uber comes. And Uber comes, and, they just come, and they essentially, leverage all the resources at the, National Robotics Lab that was with Carnegie Mellon. And, mind you, they didn't ask for permission. They didn't ask the government for any incentives. They just came. And why did they come? And then you see Apple. Then you see Facebook, right? So I think that sort of unraveled. Those were big. That was a big domino in terms of, wow, this is a place. Right. And that's thanks to Carnegie Mellon, thanks to the talent that comes out of the University of Pitt.
Yeah.
So I think those things, started to occur. Then, we had other companies that had some success and had some exits.
And that coincides and parallels with, on the commercial real estate side, I think Google started out with 2 people in Regis in a co-working space at One Oxford Center. And then they did the lease at Carnegie Mellon. In one of my first weeks in commercial real estate, there was a broker event at what would be Bakery Square, before it was fully developed. That you could still smell the cookies there. At the time when I looked around, I thought, my Lord, how is this going to happen? And to your point, Google invested so much into our region at that point. It did seem like that was a Jupiter effect, where it pulled in then all these other tech companies.
But then Uber, then you go to Uber,
on that autonomous vehicle side of things. So I can definitely pinpoint that as well. So that's really good insight, and it's a nice walk down memory lane too, to some extent. So
very appreciative of that.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, this has been very enjoyable for me and for Colliers. Again, we appreciate all the work that you and the council do for our business community, and really appreciate your time. I know you're extremely busy, including when we're doing this interview this morning. So thanks so much, Audrey.
No, thank you. Thank you for your work.
So that wraps it up for the interview with Audrey Russo, again, CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, for Colliers' second quarter quarterly reports. Thanks so much.